And welcome viewers to the Daily Space Weather. We're looking at the closest star here. And we saw some coronal mass ejections happen yesterday. The coronal mass ejection event is not yet over. We expect to see additional coronal mass ejections. And you can see actually one happening right up here. This filament in this area destabilizes. Late in the day yesterday, more like midway through the day yesterday. Part of it collapsed, part of it was sent flying through the solar system. Not in an Earth-facing trajectory. Here's some more imagery. The last one was ionized helium. Now we're looking at ionized iron and polarized light to give us the colorized magnetogram. Sunspot 2835 down here is a beta gamma class sunspot. It does harbor the type of fields associated with perhaps an M-class flare. Very likely to see additional C-class flares come out of that sunspot group. This area up here is only a plage, although we did see some tiny umbrae develop in the past few hours. So we'll take a look at that toward the end of the video as well. And let's take a look at the viewpoint from stereo A here, located at Lagrangian point 5. Which is right here under my pointer. And consumer tip, the sun rotates in this fashion, and all the planets orbit in this fashion as well. So while stereo A is orbitally behind the Earth, it sees space weather ahead of the Earth. And that's also why we call the left side of the sun, from this perspective, the east. So here's the stereo A coronagraph. And some or all of this plume right here will either collapse or eject over the next, I'll say 24 hours. And let's actually go to Lagrangian point 1. So Lagrange point 1 is about 1 million miles toward the sun, in between sun and Earth. And here's one of the instruments on the SOHO spacecraft. It's the LASCO C2. And this will show yesterday's coronal mass ejection. It looks like it'll entirely miss the Earth off to the west. We don't see any earthly facing component there. I'll rock this back for you. We don't see any ejecta any place except on the right of the screen there, which would be the west. Here's the LASCO C3 while we're here. And you should see the same thing there as the gas comes out of the corona and gets more and more diffuse as it heads out through the solar system. It was a forecasted coronal mass ejection. And here's 193 angstroms as well. There is at least one coronal hole right up here. And by the way, there's a large comet about to enter the system. Expected to arrive in the year 2031. It'll only be at about 10 astronomical units. An astronomical unit is the distance from the Earth to the Sun. It'll be at about 10 astronomical units, kind of close to Saturn. I just figured I would cover that real quick. And there is an image of this. There is the signal. It's known as UN 271. So this is one of the largest Oort cloud comets ever detected. There's that image once again. Expected to show up in the year 2031. And by the way, here's a diagram of the solar system. Here's where things are now. And we've advanced that 1 week as Earth prepares to swing past Saturn and Jupiter once again. Next, the star chart. Here we are at in-the-sky.org if you're wondering what stars are above your head. Put in your location. I've drawn in the ecliptic. It's this yellow line. And you may see the Moon, Saturn, and Jupiter up there if you're up before dawn. The 10.7 centimeter radio flux, which is the radio output, by the way, from the upper chromosphere and the lower corona, is at 83 solar flux units. Here is the 1 year chart of that to put it in context. Waiting for the update there from Solon.info. The radio flux is this black line, the most proportional data set to sunspot number. No warnings by NOAA here on the Space Weather Enthusiast dashboard. Forecasting geomagnetic calm conditions over the next 3 days. And coronal mass ejections and solar flares could change that forecast. Let's see if it happens. Next, let's take a look at earthquakes. So there's a 90-day bar graph, and I would note that over the last 90 days, we're seeing a massive drought of 7+ magnitude earthquakes. You can see how often those red bars happen on historic graphs, such as the year 2020, the year 2019. It's a massive lull, a drought of 7+ magnitude earthquakes. By the way, New Mexico saw a 4.4 23 hours ago there, a 4.4 magnitude quake at Mexico. And here's the world seismicity graphic here, sorted by magnitude. A few 5+ magnitude quakes happened in the past 24. Let's scroll up the list here at USGS. So at least one deep quake happened at Afghanistan. There's another one at Fiji Islands. That one over 530 kilometers depth and a 4.3 magnitude. And if we leave anything off the list that you notice that we didn't just leave us a comment and let us know, we read all of our comments. That may be the largest quake of the past 24 there, a 5.4 at Turkey. Also, Timor-Leste saw a deep quake. Tonga saw a 4.5 at over 260 kilometers depth. Deep quake at Chile as well, 131 kilometers depth at the 4.8 magnitude quake. A couple 5+ magnitudes here in the Kermadec Trench, northeast of New Zealand. Chile also saw a deep quake, a 4.4 magnitude at 137 kilometers estimated depth. There was also a 5.3 at the Kermadec Islands, and a 5.2 at the Solomon Islands, and a 5.1 at the Solomon Islands. Are those foreshocks? Well, the answer is I don't know. Leave us a comment if you have a theory. Let's look at volcanoes. Mount Etna remains on the list, although volcanic activity has stopped. Suwanosejima, unknown volcanic ash cloud there. It's exploded. Tucono exploded as well. And that activity produces a 7,000-foot plume of ash. Fuego in Guatemala, 16,000-foot plume of volcanic ash there. Sangay exploding. Flight level 200, it's a 20,000-foot ash plume. Sabancaya, 24,000-foot ash plume as it explodes. And Nevados de Chilean, also rounding out our list here. Explosive activity there. And a volcanic ash cloud of 13,000 feet. It's a great reminder to not pole vault the caldera, as not everybody can be a superhero like Steve Stimpak. So please, viewers, do not pole vault the caldera. And please support the channel via the links below the video. You'll find them in the description. Click on the links. Support the channel. smAshomash.com. So we did see one C-class solar flare here in the past 24 hours. It was associated with the coronal mass ejection that we covered earlier in the video. It was a very minor C-class flare, and the peak flux happened right at 1400 hours universal time, 2 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, or 1400 Zulu. No proton strikes, as none of the ejecta were Earth-directed. There's the GOES magnetometer over the past 3 days. Fairly smooth there. And Earth is in a North Pole current sheet shown here in green. This is the GONG-2 data gathered from ground-based magnetometers as well as magnetometers on stereo A and stereo B at Lagrange point 5 and 4 respectively. And there is a South Pole current sheet on the way. We can expect within the next, I'll say, 36 hours. As little as 18 hours. So I'll say 18 to 36 hours until Earth is in a South Pole current sheet. Again, this portion shown here in red. Here's the line of sight ecliptic plane field plot. This also shows you the solar magnetogram. And a little uptick going on in the past week or so here with solar activity. Here's the line of sight coronal hole plot. And we've got some South Pole oriented and North polar field oriented holes here rather. None of them are transequatorial yet. This one from the south that's rotating in here just to the north of sunspot 2835 is reaching up toward the equator. The more defined one in the more Earth-facing zone right here is North Pole oriented and nowhere near the equator. And there you can see that coronal hole showing up there on the detected coronal holes graphic, as well as a designation here of sunspot 2835, Beta Gamma class on the Integrated Space Weather Analysis Center. Next, I'd like to thank our patrons. Thanks for funding the videos, patrons. If it wasn't for you, the videos may not exist anymore, or they might not be publicly visible or free for everybody to view. So thanks, patrons. And perhaps you too would consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/smashamash. There are all sorts of perks. And to our patrons, please leave us a comment. Let us know what your favorite perk is of being a Patreon. Patreon.com/smashamash. KP Index currently in geomagnetic calm conditions. For you new viewers, the KP Index is a measurement of global geomagnetism. And we're at a KP of 1. Global geomagnetism quite calm at the moment. And now the real-time solar wind data. Pretty uneventful here as well over the past 24. Current conditions are just over 4 protons per cubic centimeter for the solar wind density. Solar wind speed just under 400 kilometers per second. Let's take a look at the geospace. Here's a 4-hour geospace magnetosphere movie showing magnetohydrodynamic pressure. And not surprisingly uneventful here, as the solar wind has been quite steady over the past 24 hours, and indeed the last 4 hours. Some tiny pressure buildup here on the non-sun-facing side of the planet out toward the magnetotail. Next, ground magnetic perturbations. We're interested in what's going on the ground level as well. So here is the geospace delta B, changes to the Earth's B field. We show this segment daily due to the polar excursion that we're currently living through. We've got 2 North Poles, one over Canada and one over Siberia. The South Pole has left the Antarctic continent entirely and is someplace in the Southern Ocean south of Australia. Anyway, this is 4 hours of ground magnetic perturbations, geospace delta B. By the way, today we'll be streaming our meteorology segment live to Twitch. And I would remind our YouTube viewers to make sure you press like and subscribe over on YouTube. If you haven't, if you're new to the channel, press subscribe. Tell your friends and foes about the content. Share on your favorite social media. Let us know what your favorite social media is in the comments. And don't forget to check our playlists as well, youtube.com/smashamash/playlists. Thanks to our new subscribers, as well as our loyal viewers who've been with us for years. We're also on BitChute. And we did upload yesterday's Daily Space Weather Supplemental to BitChute as well as to YouTube. If you didn't check that out, check it out. It's got some fairly spectacular solar imagery on it. Today's cosmology segment will be probably non-existent. We'll let you know later if we'll be making a cosmology segment or not. We will show you NASA's astronomy picture of the day. a picture of hydrogen alpha imagery of the closest star, and it's got a transiting Tiangong Chinese space station in the top image and the International Space Station in the bottom image. I don't know if NASA's flexing because the International Space Station is bigger, but in any case, apod.nasa.gov if you'd like to check it out yourself. Great detail of the closest star here. Some high-resolution hydrogen alpha imagery here using a hydrogen alpha filter. Great job, Wang Letian. Wang Letian of Eyes at Night. Also, don't forget to check our other cosmology segments. There are like 200 of them at youtube.com/smashomash/playlists. Next, looking at the electron flux data. No charging hazards as the electron flux has dropped precipitously. Here's the 1-year chart of that. That's from solon.info, by the way. And here's a 3-day chart of the GOES electron flux. Earth is surrounded by electrons. And there is the density data on that. Here's the forecast model, the green boxes of the forecast. And NOAA was surprised a little bit at this sudden dip in electron flux, expecting electron flux to be fairly flat here over the next 3 days. Here's the total electron content forecast. This is the electron density for the entire air column, all the way from your GPS handset up to a GPS satellite in a geosynchronous, very high, tens of thousands of miles altitude orbit. Nothing to write home about there. And there's a diagram of that. Distances shown in miles. Next, the ionosphere. And we're looking at one slice of the atmosphere now, just the F ionosphere layer in vibrational frequency. So we've been seeing continued anomalies here over Central South America and the South Pacific. And those have subsided here a little bit, although still some lingering ionospheric anomalies here, right in this area. We would expect the highest vibrational frequencies to appear in the Northern Hemisphere since it's Northern Hemisphere summer right now. But not over that part of the world. Perhaps it has something to do with the South Atlantic anomaly. I wouldn't be surprised if it did, but I wouldn't conjecture about it either. Anyway, that's the full day of data. Pull up the latest image here. This latest image coming in at 9:15 Universal Time. And here are the daily space weather bonus features. At Smash News Network, least busted name of news. Looking at the El Teide ground-based solar observatory in El Teide, Spain. You can still see some filaments down here around the southern hemisphere as well as up here. Here's some more imagery. It's the GOES 16 SUVI thematic map, and you can see a lot less filaments in between Earth and Sun right now. The filaments are these darker orange portions. Also some minor crown prominences popping up here around the South Solar Polar region. I would state again that the coronal mass ejection events are not yet complete. Expect to see more in the next day or so. So here's the intensity gram and a close-up view of sunspot 2835. Again, it has gained complexity here, so it hasn't grown a lot in size, but it has gained in complexity. Don't be surprised to see it produce an M-class solar flare, and it's quite likely to produce C-class solar flares. Here's some more animated imagery. This is 171 angstroms, also from the Solar Dynamics Observatory. Thanks for tuning in, folks. If anybody tells you eyes open, no fear, they're probably somebody that's never been exposed to any adversity whatsoever, because that's a ridiculous idea. And may that solar wind be at your back.